All right, we're live. Okay, thanks for joining us here at Writers Fix Problems. Um, I am your host, Scott McCullough. I'm the writer of Doorkickers. Joining me today is Mike Barron and Mike Bennett. So two Mikes, both with the last name beginning with B. This is a theme that we're going with here today, because in order to make it in the world as a writer, evidently you have to be named Mike. Oddly enough, my first name is Michael as well. So now that you're thoroughly confused, let's dive into. So Mike Barron, you are I'm going to call you a lifelong writer and veteran of the comic industry. You created some fairly iconic indie books from the '80s, the Badger, Nexus. You've worked with all the big companies: DC, Marvel, Dark Horse, et cetera, et cetera. The first work that I read of yours that I am cognizant that it was you was the Punisher, the ongoing Punisher series. So I just want to let you know that before we get into all of this, I really appreciated your run on that book. How many issues of that did you write? It was several years, right?
I wrote Punisher 1 through number 65 and a number of Punisher war journals, plus a number of graphic novels.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Punisher was really the first place that like I said, your name, I kind of put your name to an actual book. So I was, back in the day, I was subscribed to that. So I got those in my mailbox, and those little brown mailers every month. Okay, so it's cool to have one of my comic writing heroes on here.
We actually had an issue we called the plain brown wrapper issue, which was the editor's idea, and the cover was made out of the kind of paper they make shopping bags out of.
I remember that. That's so weird. Those kind of gimmick covers. That was back in early. Yeah. But those gimmick covers from the '90s were fun, you know. All right, Mike Bennett. So, Mike Bennett, I look at you as a role model for my future. You know, you were in government service, and now you are a writer. I am in government service, and I am working at becoming a writer. It's kind of like an artist, right? I may write, but it's the title of writer is it's very ambiguous in how you define that. But sitting at home, writing books, putting them out for the world to consume, I think that's a great definition of what being a writer is. And Mike Bennett, you have definitely succeeded. You've got the three books from your series are already out. You got a fourth one coming out,
Book 4 is in the process of being in the formatting process, and I'm going to say, roughly 2 weeks, the print version will be out and available, and it usually takes another 2 weeks or so to get it into the Kindle version for some reason.
Okay, great. So
that's 4, and then I'm in the process of writing 5 right now.
Kindle is probably how I will consume that book, so I'm looking forward to it. Just having that iPad with 1,000 book library, in my backpack is a great way to travel. So, okay, so let's dive into it, and I'll come back to Mike Barron on this. We all kind of find our way into our careers in odd ways, and sometimes it's a long path, and sometimes it's pretty obvious. Very rarely do you see the person, especially for something like a writer, I'm going to be a writer. Then I go to college to the Iowa Writer Workshop, and they do the program. They get their MFA in writing, and then they become a writer. That's not like the obvious route. There's the pipeline to becoming a writer is not an obvious one. Clearly, I think me and Mike Bennett are great examples of that. What's your pipeline into writing? How did you get from where you are today?
Back to my childhood. I wanted to be a writer ever since I was a kid, growing up in Mitchell, South Dakota. And I went into a cigar store and purchased a John D. MacDonald novel for 35 cents. And as I came out, I stopped there on the sidewalk. I must have been 12 years old, and I looked at the book. And I thought, well, geez, this guy isn't writing this for his health. He must get paid for it. That's what I want to do. But it took me a long time to learn how to write novels. It took me 30 years because I'm a slow learner. The comics always came easy to me. I went to the University of Wisconsin, and after I graduated, I heard that there were newspapers in Boston that would hire anybody who could string a couple of words together in an intelligent manner. So I moved to Boston, and I crashed with some friends. And my first job out of college was smoking marijuana for the government. I responded to an ad in the Boston Phoenix, asking for volunteers who would be willing to live on a hospital ward for a month and smoke the government's marijuana and take a battery of tests. It was just like college.
And what year was this?
1971.
Wow, yeah, that was those early days.
And when I got out, I wrote that up and I submitted it to the Boston Phoenix, and they bought it, and that's how I became a writer.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, just the fact that they do those kind of trials is just, it's head scratching in the first place. But the fact that that's how you landed your job in writing, that's noteworthy.
I became music editor, and it was my job to go out night after night and listen to music and write about it and interview musicians, which was my dream job. I loved it. I met a lot of great musicians. I saw a lot of great musicians. I'm still writing about music today. But when I moved back to Madison, Wisconsin in 1977, I was working at an insurance company, and I got a call from an editor who said, there's some guy down here trying to sell us his art, and he draws just like you. I had been trying to turn myself into an artist. And what the editor meant by that is we were both drawing superheroes. So I arranged to meet Steve Rude on the steps of the Student Union. And of course, he drew nothing like me. He opened his portfolio, and I gave up drawing. And we teamed up, and we created Nexus for Capital Comics. And that's how I got my start in comics.
So Nexus was the first kind of, your first gas into the world. That's awesome. That's such an iconic character. That's a great, I hate to, this is little to do with the writing, I'm sure, but that iconic, costume of his, I know you're looking at doing some more Nexus stuff here in the near future. I mean, that thing that holds up so well. Yeah, there he is right there. I mean, that's such a great costume.
Yeah, we kind of designed it together. The lightning bolt was my idea, and then the dude ran with it and came up with a design with the hip boots and the visor was my idea too.
Yeah, all the best ideas from my book are my ideas, and then the ones that people don't like, I always tell, that's something the artist came up with that I wasn't sure about. So, but with you and Steve Rude, I mean, you guys, that's such a great series. Are you still working with him at all on any of this stuff, or is he?
No, about 10 years ago, the dude began rejecting my writing and said he could do it better. And now he's got this huge book out. Let me show it to you. This is the small version.
Oh, okay.
I was just in Phoenix over the weekend to sign copies of the big version, which weighs 10 pounds and is enormous and is over 300 pages. But he hired me to write that script for him when he was the publisher, and he rewrote every line. And all I can say is check the reviews on Amazon. I'm doing my own Nexus material, and I have a graphic novel coming out from Dark Horse next year with art by Richard Bonk. And then I have another graphic novel in the works with Dark Horse. And then I have a 4-issue miniseries in the works with Dark Horse that Sergio Cariella is going to illustrate. I'm very excited.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
And we're about to send Monster Hunt 2, which is a team up between Nexus, Lone Star, and Bigfoot Bill to the printer. And that's terrific too. I mean, wait till I don't know if you've seen any of the art for that, but it's just mind blowing. Yeah. Matthew Weldon is the artist, and he just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I saw his cover on that, man. Matt, actually, I got a drawing by Matt Weldon in the back of my Doorkickers book too. Man, his stuff is so good. He's got such a great, kind of organic touch. But anyway, I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole. I could talk about comic art all day, but we're talking about writing today. And on that note, let's transition over to the Duke himself, Mike Bennett. So Mike, you heard how, I think probably the one thing that I'm going to find is in common between the three of us is we all at an early age wanted to write,
Sure.
Personally for me, like I didn't think I could be a writer because I thought that was hard. I thought it was something that like smart people had to do. But then I met somebody who was an actual writer and I realized this guy is dumb as a box of rocks. And what I found out was that with writing, it's not about the ideas and necessarily even the execution. It's just about working hard and doing it, right? And so I think that would kind of resonate with you as well, as somebody who worked in government service. There's a lot of just kind of diligence and working hard. Like in my military career, just being a hard worker counts for almost 90% of my success. Not any of the brilliant ideas or anything like that. Just being A, dependable, and B, ready to be flexible and dig in when the time comes. How much have you, so just in reflecting on your pipeline into becoming a writer, how much of that did you pull from, your time in your career working for Uncle Sammy?
I guess first thing, as far as reading, before I started thinking I could write, I started reading, and I do remember very, very early 70s, 10, 11 years old, reading comic books.
Yeah.
And Sergeant Fury or Sergeant Rock, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
which somehow influenced me, to want to go in the Army. As far as writing, even most of my time was as a military officer, not all. Some was enlisted.
Oh, so you're a real colonel and not a Kentucky colonel.
Yeah, I retired from the Army. Yep. But in that process, whether you're in command or staff, you end up writing a lot.
Yeah.
And if you're working intelligence type stuff, you write information reports, IIRs, intelligence information reports. So you just write. I mean, you just do write. I had a tendency to write a little more flamboyantly, I think, than most. That just very block and tackle. Just cover the stuff. I always wanted to write well, so I did there also. So I think I've written even as a government employee or as a contractor for the government. 30. Almost 40 years. Now I'm doing it, as I explained earlier, as an extension of something that was meant to be somewhat of a gift to my mom, and then I continued it after.
Well, I mean, I think the whole idea of writing that for your mom, I think that was I think that's great because it gives you a real kind of concrete connection to your audience versus just this kind of amorphous, hey, I think this is a good thing and I'm going to put it out there and oh wow, look at that, some people bought it.
Yeah. The short story was I was working and she fell ill and I came home for her last time on this earth, and while I was home, she really is the one that influenced me to go into college and be a writer in college. And it was just to the point where I was like, well, let's see if I can kind of put something in writing, capture this, go through the whole process, and on Christmas Day, present to her the book that I wrote, which is the first book, Las Vegas on $12 a day. And I did. I mean, I kind of just by the skin of my teeth made the deadlines, if you will, to get all that done. And then she died 4 days later. So I got it done just in time. But once I had the book in my hand and all the thoughts that went with it, I said, well, this journey, this could continue because I didn't really finish everything in that small volume. So that's
Right.
kind of what started me. And like any writer, I think you end up capturing your experiences, things that you did, and then next thing you know, you're writing about it, as a character or something, or just people you observed. I mean, over the course of 30 years, how many different people did I observe? And I get an amalgamation maybe of 4 or 5 different dudes mashed into one person named Mojo, or Goose, or whomever, and kind of go from there. So
Yeah.
you meld all these experiences and you put it into the thing, you put it on paper.
Well, I mean, from my personal experience, I mean, I definitely started writing based on things that I was experiencing, in the real world. I mean, I was never a special operations guy. I mean, I was working right next to guys who were, and I was working with folks who had many years in that kind of life, and I was working with OGA guys and things like that. And I was seeing how they operate, in Afghanistan and places like that. And so I'm taking these experiences in, and it's the writer's brain is like something that you don't have to be a writer to have that. That's the one where you kind of take in all the stuff from your world, I think, and you just kind of create these stories in your head, and like what if scenarios and things like this. I already, I've had a conversation with my daughter about this because she's already kind of telling me about some of these stories that she's kind of putting in her head, and would ask me questions, these what if questions that are so wonderful that kids ask, right? And so, I had a similar kind of journey, I think, to get to where I started writing, because I started drawing from all that kind of life stuff. Now, one of the things, so I want to pivot here a little bit, right? Because about how we're talking. I brought stuff from my personal life in. I know Mike Bennett brought stuff from his long career in. Mike Barron, you have got amazing things that you're writing about that you have not done as careers. I mean, I don't think you've been a futuristic superhero anywhere, or I don't think that you were a vigilante, going after the mob, wearing a big skull on your chest for. So
Well, let me say this about that.
I want to hear about where you come, because you're coming from a different place to write this stuff than, say, like myself and Mike are.
Well, it's the writer's job to imagine every point of view. If you don't have a great imagination and you
Yeah.
can't look at everything from all sides, then you shouldn't be a writer. As I said, I have 3 rules. The number 1 rule is to entertain. That's my job, and I never lose sight of that. Number 2 is to show, don't tell, which sounds so simple, and yet so many people can't seem to do it. And that goes for straight prose as well. And the third is to be original. And we're all unique human beings. And when we start writing, if we're good writers, we bring to what we write our own unique worldview, our own tastes, and analysis of the way things work. Now, in the example of me writing The Punisher or any military hero, I have to imagine what that hero is thinking about. And to do that, I do research. I read books by military. I study history. I love history. I read all about it. But most of all, I try to imagine what their worldview is, what their point of view is. Now, a lot of people today are saying, well, you can't write Luke Cage unless you're black.
Unless
You
you're
can't
black,
write
right?
Master of Kung Fu unless you're Chinese, which brings me to the question. Should William Shakespeare have been allowed to write Othello? Now, it's absurd on the face of it, because Othello
Yeah.
is a great play, just as everything Shakespeare wrote is great. And that was the gift of his imagination, the imagination of the writer, and the ability to put himself in the frame of any and all characters, such as Iago, the Merchant of Venice, King Henry. Such a wide panoply of different points of view. And he nailed it because he took his job seriously. He studied history, and he put himself in their mind frame. And that's what the writer has to do.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I think one of the things that we've seen a lot in popular media is like unless you have some sort of lived experience, you can't understand what's going on inside somebody's head. Well, I mean, okay, so I've never been in a lot of situations, but I've observed a lot of situations, and I've seen how people go through those situations, even if it's like, watching news clips from the Vietnam War, right? I was never in Vietnam. So does that mean I can't write about Vietnam? Well, I know about the military, and I see what these young men went through, and they were drafted, which is a different experience than what I had. But the thing, going through that experience doesn't make you the ability, the person that can write the story. You're a human, and you understand what motivations are as a human. If you're able to kind of tap into how you would feel in those same situations, this is how a white person can experience discrimination without ever living the experience of going through the civil rights era or something like that. We're all human, right? I mean, I think the interesting thing, another great example is Anna Karenina. That's probably the best book I've ever read about a woman. But Tolstoy was not a woman. Well, some people say his wife wrote the book and he put his name on it so it'd sell. But I think we all know that that's just a kind of a construct of the latter day academics who refuse to say a man could write a woman so thoroughly and understand her position. But speaking of understanding positions I've never experienced, welcome Ryan. Ryan is a member of our panel. He comes on here every week. You know, this week the panel has seemed to have abandoned me. Everybody's got boo-boos and owies and prior commitments, and I really wished we could have had a more full house here to meet with these two, writers who are just bringing so much entertainment, if you will, to so many readers. Ryan, why don't you unmute yourself and say hello? Or no, is he not going to do that?
Sorry,
is he not even there?
I got a dog yapping in the background, so just give me a couple seconds.
Okay.
Show us the dog.
Yeah, well, yeah, we want to see the dog, right?
All right. So I'm sorry. What was the question?
The question is, can you show us the dog?
Oh no, I already put her in the crate to shut her up. So.
That's a good trick. You just put her in the crate. She knows. Oh, this is my quiet place.
Yeah, sometimes. She's learning. She's young.
No, Ryan, we were just talking about being able to write has a lot more to do with understanding and to kind of synthesize the experiences of people that we've never, we haven't lived those lives. So how do we do that? And that's what we were just talking about.
Yeah, well, it's like I said last week, people always say write what you know, and I like to say write what you understand. And I think we're all to be a writer, you have to be perceptive and you have to be empathetic if you're going to be true to your characters. And I think when people try and categorize things, male, female, white, black, they're missing out a lot. Like, just because I'm a white man doesn't mean that I can write a story about a rural white man from Tennessee. I have a completely different lived experience. And so whether I'm writing about a black man or an Asian woman or a white man from Tennessee, I'm going to have to do my research, and I'm going to have to understand and empathize with the lived experience of the character I'm writing. And that's really what it boils down to, is if you can't do that, then yeah, maybe you should just write yourself into all your fiction. But to be a successful writer, and successful, I don't mean money, but actually being true to your art. You just have to be able to be empathetic enough to listen to people's lived experience and infuse your characters with that.
I think that's a great point. Mike Bennett. So, taking that kind of thought to kind of the next level, right? So you've got a really deep breadth of experience, you know, especially in the intelligence field and in your military background. How hard is it when you're writing on these topics, as some of your writing touches on? How hard is it to kind of like dumb that down, or to, you know, gloss over things that, you know, as a professional, you would have, you know, oh, it's hard for me to take this out because this is such a huge step, but the writer is never going to be able to connect to that, or it's just not that important for somebody who is. So how hard is it for you to hand wave your experience out of some of the stuff that you write?
Well, say in the first book, as an example, I had my brother read it, and he bogged down in some of the technical details of some things I get into, which was good feedback. So I took that feedback and started applying it more in books 2, 3, and 4. So less technical detail. Yeah, you're right. At times, a lot of experience is problematic because I was an engineer and I was this, and I've got 50 different facets, and my understanding of certain things is different than others. So, you know, how do I deal with that? So I took that feedback pretty seriously from him and a couple others, and I wouldn't say dumb it down, but I did write it more in a relatable way, or put it in the context of the story, that it was surrounded with so much context, you know, anyone could kind of read it and say, okay, I know what he's getting at, and the reader would connect the dots. So I guess the way I deal with that is be empathetic of that, and then add a lot more. What in my mind, I'm thinking this is superfluous detail. I shouldn't have to, you know, say these 50 things. I should only have to say 3, and everyone would understand. I can't do that. So you have to have the discipline as a writer to lay all that stuff down. I think Mike said it before: show, not tell. You know, the entire sequence of things, so that the average person can read it and say, "Oh yeah, I know what he's talking about." Even if he does, you know, and I use acronyms like any military guy. The first one is chock full.
Yeah.
I started putting a glossary in the third one, and I already had readers, you know, applaud, sort of thing. Oh, thank God he has a glossary, and now I know what CONUS means, and I know what, you know, things that I take for granted.
Yeah.
That I know I shouldn't. The first time I was in a rush, I started to calm down and, you know, lay things out more, define them, so anyone could pick it up and say, "Oh yeah, I know what he's talking about."
Well, you know, so like I grew up reading, you know, like all of us here, I think I grew up reading, and one of the things that was hugely influential, you know, on me, kind of, I won't say it's why I joined the military, but G.I. Joe. I was a huge G.I. Joe reader. You know, those comics were like my bread and water for, you know, I don't know, all through the mid 80s, right? And so, you know, one of the things I totally appreciated in G.I. Joe is that every time you said, you know, he's a great NCO, asterisk, right? And then asterisk at the bottom, non-commissioned officer, right? So, you know, every panel, it would tell you exactly what those things mean. And so I totally feel your pain, because based on some feedback of my initial readers of my book Doorkickers here, like I created this, which is, you know, a recreation of one of the X-check. It's the X-check list from the characters, because they were making reference. And if for those of you who don't know what an X-check is, that's the execution checklist. And, you know, in the military, instead of saying we're going to go do this now and then we're going to do this, they'll just have code words, right? And so it's a kind of a shared understanding of where you're at in the world and what you're doing, you know, and you throw that up on the radio so people can track your progress in the mission. Well, like, you know, my readers, my beta readers completely were like, I think I know what's going on, but what does it mean when he says, you know, Kenya here or Japan in the previous panel, you know? So I realized, oh, well, they need a copy of the actual thing so that they can follow along. And so I got a lot of great feedback, you know, from people who read it, and they said, I read the book and then I saw the X checklist at the back, and then I reread it and it made so much more sense. And, you know, they liked in a way, they like kind of being sucked into our world, right? They like to be challenged a little bit, but they don't want to be too challenged, so challenged that it takes them out of it. And I think that's a huge thing for guys like me and you who have a very very big depth of information when it comes to all this technical stuff. So,
John, I had one other thing I wanted to add, and no, you kind of reminded me. The other, and I don't want to say technique, but the other thing I did do in my second book was repetition of a certain thing. So in the second book, I talk about Nord Stream, which is a gas pipeline from Russia to Turkey, or to Germany, rather.
Germany, yeah.
And there's Turk Stream, which is one that goes to Turkey. Anyway, so there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on. Why did they develop that? Yada yada yada. And there's a lot of technical stuff of the movement of the gas and such. So I didn't just cover it one time. I covered it 3 times. So with the repetition of all these, this is why a compressor is important, and this is why I'm targeting it to destroy. So any reader after a while is going to get through that and say, okay, I got it. Now I know why they're going to blow up that particular thing versus something else.
Oh yeah, no, so that actually leads into my next question. I think that's a great point. The whole idea of repetition in order to understand the so what behind, these guys are blowing something up, and why are they doing it? What does that matter? It makes the reader understand the impact or the complicating factor that an action that somebody takes is. So when you're sifting through all that, you got 100 things that are all technical and they're all jargony. When do you come at it from a standpoint of just trying to simplify, or do you have like the Nord Stream thing? Do you try to focus on the purpose for what, if the jargon has a purpose, then it's important, and then I have to explain it? I mean, how do you kind of go through and find the wheat from the chaff when it comes through all of your vast experience for writing technical things for people who are not experts?
Well, and the other thing, as a fiction novel, I do have pictures in my books, which you don't see in a lot of. Usually, just have text.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of diagrams or pictures, even engineering diagrams at times, for that exact reason. So someone can look at the picture and say, "Oh yeah, I can see where that whizzer is, right there in this diagram."
Mm-hmm.
But I remember reading. That particular book is When Towers Fall, and there's this one chapter, I think it's 16 off the top of my head, and I read it and I was like, God damn it, I already did this. Why am I, and then I read it again and I said, okay, well, it is so deep that it's instructive actually for someone to hit it again and go, oh yeah, all that stuff, I got it. And it does fit into all this stuff that goes on in the plot later on. And actually, it goes, 2 books downstream too. So there's a lot of detail that I kind of hit in, not laborious detail, but I'm hitting it for a reason, because you're going to see this again.
Right.
It's like the instructor at the top of the class, and he's stomping his foot and he's saying, "You're going to see this again." In other words, this shit is going to be on the test.
Yeah, it's the old Chekhov thing, right? Isn't it Chekhov that says you hang a gun on the wall, it's got to go off by the end of the story?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I kind of take that to, if I'm going to add something in there, there's 2 reasons to have a detail, right? One, it's to build the world out. And in that case, it should have some other implication, even if it's not directly to the plot or the characters. And then the other is something, like you said, that is directly something that you will see again. So no, I think those are wise words for anybody out there who has a depth of knowledge. Now, speaking of
I will add a character a third of the way into the novel, just because they seem interesting to me. And when I near the end of the novel, that character becomes pivotal, essential to the resolution of the story.
Yeah, so every actor has a purpose, right? I mean, otherwise they don't really need to be there. And some people seem superfluous, but it's something they reveal that becomes later. So, like, this person has a conversation with your protagonist, and it seems like a throwaway conversation or something like that, and that character never comes back into the story, but that conversation becomes pivotal. Something along those lines, right?
Well, I guess I would ask Mike or Ryan. I've introduced a character in a book somewhat briefly, had a very big role in that book, with the intention of I will fill that out in much more detail in book 2 or 3. Now, what I'm asking for you guys is that okay, or is it you don't introduce a guy in a book without he's got to be the whatever reason for in that particular book? Is it okay to introduce someone for something you're going to see 2-3 books down the road?
I think readers love that. I mean, if it's not too, a cameo or something like that ends up becoming something later in a subsequent book. Those are almost like Easter eggs, right? Like the reader will be like, "Oh yeah, I remember that guy." I mean, you don't. I think that's absolutely okay. I mean, I haven't written a series yet. I'm starting on a couple, but I have read miniseries where there's background characters that they don't do a whole lot for the plot, but in subsequent books they end up becoming major players.
Mike Barron, I think this is a good opportunity for you to kind of tell us a little bit about your depth and breadth of expertise, which is as a writer, right? So this is one of the things I want to kind of, it's always sexy, like the kind of, the marijuana story. It's a great kind of becoming a writer, or I did this for so many years. And like Mike Bennett's a very touching story about, writing that first book for his mom. Right. And of course, those are kind of great stories. Right. But then we become a writer, right? Then you start writing, and then it's at some point it becomes workaday. Right. And so one of the things I want to tap into your kind of brain housing group and get a little out of is what's it like navigating those waters, right? I mean, you worked corporate comics, you worked indie comics, you've worked novels, you've done short stories. I mean, you've done it all. I mean, how do you kind of chart that course?
Well, it starts with an idea, obviously. Sometimes it starts with a character. Anything can be an inspiration. But what's essential is you have to understand what story is. What is story? Well, it's a dynamic narrative with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the word dynamic means that the situation is constantly in flux. If you have a protagonist who's perfectly satisfied with his life and everything is perfect and it keeps going that way, unless you're Virginia Woolf, that's not going to make a good novel. You have to make the reader care, because the most important question in fiction is, what happens next? And if the reader doesn't care what happens next, he's not going to turn the page. Well, how do you make the reader care? Well, you use every tool at your disposal, and there's a limitless number of tools, but let's name a couple of them. You can start with a character, a fascinating character, and the greatest example of that is Sherlock Holmes. And the proof of that is that Sherlock Holmes novels are being produced to this day. In fact, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has written 3 of them. Mm-hmm. A second element is a fascinating scenario, which in itself just attracts people because they want to know what's happening. Jurassic Park. What if we were able to clone dinosaurs from ancient genetic material? And then what if we were to create a theme park where people could visit them? What could go wrong? A third element is a seductive narrative voice. Somebody whose words are just so fun to read that you'll follow him, her, or it everywhere. And there are a couple of examples like this. One of my favorites is James Ellroy, who wrote L.A. Confidential and The Big Nowhere. And L.A. Confidential, of course, is a classic modern noir film. But Ellroy has a unique style. In fact, nobody dares try to follow Elroy. There are many Hemingway imitators, but there are no Elroy imitators because you can't do it. And if you've ever read one of his books, you know what I mean. He writes like a machine gun in short declarative sentences. The man came into the room. He pulled a gun from his pocket. He shot Ron between the eyes. That's, I'm just paraphrasing. It doesn't have his magic because he's got a real gift for words. In fact, he'll create words. And in the context of what he writes, you know instantly what they mean. And one example is he had his protagonist trying to drive a car up a wet, slippery, muddy hill. And he said the protagonist brodied the car up the hill. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that he followed a zigzag pattern with the gas on and the gas off, just making the car go like this until he finally got to the top of the hill. And I knew instantly that's what he meant. And those are just three of the elements that you can use to hook the reader. And if you have them all going together, then you're writing a bestseller.
Yeah, and I mean, it's easy to say that. It's hard to actually do it, right? I mean, that's the magic.
Get a sense of what is story. I mean, a lot of young writers, they get off on a tangent. Their hands take off by themselves, and they'll write something which looks good and sounds good and tastes good, but it's really not part of the story. And they love it so much that they just can't take it out, and the story just runs into a dead end there. But an experienced writer gets a sense of what is story. And if he puts something in and he doesn't know why, like I've mentioned before, it will reveal itself down the road. And every writer has this experience. When you create a character that you love, who's credible, at some point that character is going to turn around and tell you what happens next.
Yeah, Ryan and I, we've had that discussion before when those writers kind of reveal that they have a mind of their own.
Yep.
And that's a interesting and sometimes disconcerting, almost like, am I schizophrenic here or what's going on?
Well, I find it very helpful because when the writer takes over, I know I'm on the right path. And I say, of course, that's what he's going to do because it shows me the way forward.
Well, and I think that makes you know that you really understand and you've gotten inside their head. They're not just the same character. Guy B is the same as guy A, just with a different name and a different description. They've got your motivations and things like that. So that's the kind of the technical part, right? That's the writing, and I think I don't want to take away from that, but there's also the business, right? And so that's the part of so you have to be able to write. Okay, great. There's a lot of people who can write who aren't working as writers. The business aspect is one of the kind of things that I think is a little mundane to a lot of people, but at the same time, and it's a real part of making sure that paycheck comes in, making sure you can only, you got to pay the bills, but you also have these, maybe you've got your great American novel you're working on still or whatever. It's something that you've had, a passion project, maybe like bringing Nexus back, right? That's something from your past that you're deeply connected to, but maybe you're doing something else to pay the bills. I mean, so how do you kind of make that balance?
Well, there are classes on that, believe it or not. My friend Kevin J. Anderson, who writes the Dune novels, holds a seminar several times a year. It's called the Superstars Writing Seminar. And they hold it in Colorado and sometimes in Las Vegas. And part of the class is to teach you about the business of writing, the importance of contracts, what a contract means, how to go about getting paid.
Yeah. I in the world that I'm working here in indie comics, there's a lot of handshake deals and that kind of thing. And if you make a handshake deal with somebody who's honorable, usually there's no problem until you find out that one of the parties isn't honorable, and then you've already probably lost your lunch at that point.
Well, that's why it's good to have a good attorney. And, I could recommend a couple of good attorneys for people who are interested in that sort of thing. They specialize in creative arts.
Yeah, I tell you, lawyers, kind of, you can't live with them. You can't live without them. So Ryan, I want to get your thoughts on this. I mean, you're kind of like me at the beginning of your career as a writer. So what are your kind of you've been like you know how to write. You've written some stuff. What's your view on kind of the world of writing you're getting into?
Well, I mean, up until now, I've been a hobbyist, and I've come to the point where I've decided I want to take it seriously, and that does mean making it a business. That does mean making it a job. That means carving out time every day where you're working, you're writing, you're editing, you're plotting, you're doing something. And so, I mean, where I'm at right now is just at that kind of transition from a hobbyist where I work on something when I have a fit of inspiration, to a professional where it doesn't matter what my mood is, I need to produce. And then all the other aspects of the business, the legal aspects, the marketing aspects, especially if you're doing it yourself, and instead of going with a publisher, you are a publisher. So that's a whole other set of skills. And I'm not really at the point right now where I've made a decision. Yeah, I'm going to be totally indie or whatever. I think going a little hybrid isn't necessarily a bad idea. I've one series that I probably will always do indie, just because it's not really something that I think is hugely marketable, but it's a fun project and people like it. And then I have another series that I'm starting that has a much wider target audience, and would probably be more attractive to publishers. And if a decent publisher wants to take it up, I wouldn't say no. But all that is kind of moot if I'm not actually producing. So I've started coming up with what's my writing schedule, what's my output going to be, what's my 3 to 5 year plan, what kind of velocity am I planning on getting out of my writing over the next 3 to 5 years. We don't live in a world where you can write one novel a year anymore. And especially if my plan is to actually make a living off of this, one book a year is not going to cut it. So it's all of that kind of put together. But I think this year has been interesting for me, in as it's been a transition from the first part of my life, major part of my life, which was writing, was always on the back burner, and I went for years without doing anything, and kind of fits and starts. And then this year I wrote 2 novels and released one of them, and short stories on the side and things like that, and just kind of realized, hey, this is actually something that I can produce, and I can I should take this seriously and give it a shot.
Take it seriously, huh?
Writers have been preparing for this pandemic our whole lives.
No doubt, right? I mean, you've never had a better opportunity to sit down for hours and hours and days at a time in front of your computer, and you've never had so much destruction and mayhem in the world to draw upon. I'm just looking forward to the next 10 years of doomer fiction that's going to come out of this pandemic. I mean, assuming we don't have a collapse of something, or a major world war or something along those lines, but we have a lot of good writing to look forward to. So I'm going to go ahead and transition us. We talk about our work as writers, and we talk about writing techniques and things like that. But we also try to touch on the things that kind of fill that empty head of ours full of ideas, right? And that's the world around us. And so we, but we're also, as writers, dealing with other people that are writing in our culture. Some affectionately refer to it as the culture war that's going on around us. Some affectionately, refer to it as the decline of Western civilization, whatever it may be. I mean, it's the world we live in, right? And it's the media we consume that influences us as writers. So that's one of the, somebody asked me, why do you talk about that kind of stuff in your show? And I was like, well, the reason why is because we're writers. We take in information and we process it and we push it back out in a different form. So I wanted to kind of touch both on the topic of writers, but also the kind of world around us. I'm going to, Mike, I'm going to share that link that you sent to me earlier. Let me see. I'm going to throw it up here on the screen. All right. Got all these tabs. Let's see. Brave tab. All right. So, leftist, bisexual, self-obsessed, narcissism, Superman is a reflection of themselves. So, I have not read all of the story yet. I skimmed through it, and I think it's got some really cool stuff in it. Mike, why don't you share this link to me? Why don't you tell me what you took away from this? Because we see it all the time, and especially in the comic industry. I mean, it's just I don't want to say that somebody on the left is a bad guy or can't write or whatever. But what we're seeing is a monoculture within comics and the negative side effects of that. So, what are you seeing?
Well, what I mentioned before was that my first job was to entertain. The major companies have forgotten that.
Yeah.
They're hiring people that have no clue how to tell a story. Now, that headline speaks for itself. I can't argue with that. And that's what's happening throughout our culture. Another word for it is virtue signaling, which is a form of narcissism. You've all seen the road. Maybe you haven't, but every city I go to is filled with these signs in front yards that say, "We believe," "Black Lives Matter," "Science is real," "Water is life," etc., as a bunch of statements thrown out as markers on the road that say, "You can't argue with us. This is how we roll." They're bumper stickers, the bumper sticker mentality. A wise man keeps his mouth shut. A fool brays like a jackass about what he believes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think part of it is a sign of our culture that we're living in, but it's also, I mean, how much responsibility do these companies bear towards this? I mean, because, like, for instance, like I said, I don't begrudge anybody their politics, right? I mean, in the old days, before the plague, I had plenty of left-wing friends that, that we, like, the old thing was sit down and have a beer with, and you could disagree about some politics, and then you could talk about the game, and then you talk about, the weather and all the things in our kids, right? There's so many things that we have that are in common. It doesn't make sense to focus on one or two things that we have that are different. And so I like to not try to blame some of these writers, but I mean, a lot of them are just, they're self-selected,
Well, I know some of these writers, and they're nasty pieces of work.
Well, right. That's what I was getting to. And I think, and is that these writers can't take over these books, right? It's editorial.
Well, they can. What's bewildering to me is that the sales are in the toilet. These books aren't making money, and yet they keep pumping them out. And there's been talk in the comics industry for several years now that both Marvel and DC are just going to stop publishing pamphlets. They're not profitable. I don't understand why they continue to greenlight this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so a great example is the recent discussion about Superman coming out as being, actually it's the son of Superman coming out as being gay, right? And so,
have you seen the art? Oh my God! Let me send you some of the art. It would be my pleasure.
Oh my God! I think Finger Drilled is a great descriptor for that art. It's just literally. Mike Bennett, you remember back in the old days, people just pencil whip, like an op order or something like that, and you could see right through it. That's what they're doing with this art nowadays.
Okay, it's in your Twitter feed there.
Oh, all right, I'm gonna pull it out.
And that's hardly the worst of it.
Oh my God! Yes, you guys are gonna love this. Ryan, you're gonna love this. I know you will like this.
Yeah, I'm sure I will. Where is it?
I'm getting ready to share it here.
Here we go. Here's the money shot right here.
Okay, hold on. Let me pull up. Let's see. I got to open that in a separate. Oh yes. All right. Bear with me, guys. I'm.
As far as why this stuff is being pursued, I hear you when they say they're not making money, and they're going to fold shop. It's just got to be the exact opposite. For some reason, this does draw the audience or an audience of sufficient size. I mean, why else would you do it?
It's not. I
don't
see
know.
the figures. I see the figures for the sales.
It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
If you want to see the figures, there's a good site to keep track of this. It's icv2.com, which stands for Internal Correspondence Volume 2. Show the next one I sent you.
Yes. So I just want to give a little commentary. Nothing political here. I mean, the guy has pink hair. No big deal. They're just two bros hanging out, getting ready to fist bump.
Other pictures than that, though.
I mean, come on. It's all innocent fun. Let's go to the next image and see what else these two fine lads are up to. Let's see. There we go. Totally wholesome, right? I mean, this is there we go. That's it. Yes.
So Mike, you're saying that this is this. I mean, I'm thinking in terms of it. For example, in the movies, Ghostbusters. You had Ghostbusters back in the '80s, and that was just a phenomenon. They made tons of money. The whole thing. And then you had the second iteration just recently of Ghostbusters, which I haven't seen, but I know what the deal is, and me personally, that doesn't do anything for me. Clearly, it's not original. It's just something else, and then you throw a whole litany of female characters into the thing. And from what I recall reading, that particular movie did not do well commercially at the box office.
It lost money, yeah.
And I think there's a couple others of that example. So again, you go back to why is this being done? If we're all capitalists, thank God. If you're into doing whatever you're producing, manufacturing some service or good product, if you're doing that for profit, why would you, after one time or maybe two times, and you see the results are not economically feasible to continue to pursue, why on earth would you continue to do it?
A certain madness
because it's PR.
has taken over these people.
No, it's public relations, and the studios can afford it. And
Marvel
and DC can afford
So
it.
you think that they're making enough money on Star Wars or whatever, and other movies, that they can afford to have in their portfolio one or two losers they know they're going to lose their ass on, but it's
one or two
popular.
losers would be acceptable, but now we're looking like at 60 to 75% losers.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you, this is going to go a little deeper, right? And so I think there's a different type of profit motive, right? So we think of profit motive as in cha-ching, dollar signs, right?
Mm-hmm.
My pocket getting fatter. And there's plenty of people who want to get fat off of all the largesse that's going around. I mean, Scarlett Johansson doesn't, she's not in it for her health. I mean, she sued Disney because Disney chose to release the Black Widow movie in a way that was outside of the contract that she wrote.
Mm-hmm.
So why would they do this, right? Well, first of all, there's two types of people, I think, that are in Hollywood specifically, and you'll see, Mike, you've seen this in the comic industry. There's those that think this stuff is great. They have drank the Kool-Aid, and they think that, there are plenty of people out there that feel this way, and it's a silent majority, right? And if we just get this kind of material out there in front of the masses, they're going to embrace it because that's what they agree. And then there's the other ones that haven't drank that Kool-Aid. They're smarter at a much higher level. And, this is where we start talking in our military terms. And they see mass media as an information operation. And it is a way to use the old Bernays. Now I'm getting back into my kind of, technical world that I live into, using Bernaysian propaganda to not necessarily sell a product to the masses, but to educate the masses as to why they should buy something that they don't want to buy.
The correct thinking. There's another word for that.
Exactly.
It's propaganda.
Right. He wrote the book called Propaganda. That's why I said Edward Bernays, because you go back and read his book from, I think, 1922. It's called Propaganda. It absolutely talks about and sets the stage for the last 100 years of mass communications. There's a reason why Goebbels had I think multiple copies and in German and one signed by Edward Bernays. So it's a very kind of insidious kind of thing. And I think there's a very, very, very small percentage of people who are actually thinking that way. And I don't think that they're all necessarily the fat cats at the top.
Let me point this out. Most people have their hands full doing their jobs, taking care of their family, and kicking back on weekends. But there's a certain class of person who spends every waking minute scheming how to get power over others.
Yes.
And now they're after every institution there is. They invaded the schools 50 years ago. Now they've completely taken over government. And to get along, they've taken over all these entertainment companies too. They forgot the rule number one. Rule number one is to entertain. And now they're pushing propaganda on all levels because they're true believers. And there's no arguing with true believers.
Well, and not everything that they're leading with is just bad. A lot of it's common sense, right? And so let me give you an example, Mike.
Please.
You can come. So, what did you think when you read the New Mutants graphic novel that Claremont did back in the early '80s? What did you think of that?
Well, that was a good story because
it was a good story.
He wasn't hammering you over the head. It's a legitimate concern. And as John Gardner writes in On Moral Fiction, we feel cheated if the story doesn't have a moral epiphany. And in that sense, I mean that we expect good to conquer and evil to be punished. Now, of course, there are lots of stories where good dies in the effort, but at the same time, evil is punished, and we can accept that. But now we are being presented fables that we know are false.
That's right.
They're rammed down our throat, and they're saying, you buy this or you will be exiled from the world of civilization.
Well, and I think the point there, though, is that they're leading with ideas that are not bad on the surface, i.e., for instance, take all men as they come, right? Like, the colorblind society, or, men and women can both do things, right? Yeah, well, men and women are different, but at the same time, they're mostly the same. And most of the things that we can do, generally together, right? And that's where New Mutants was a success for social justice warriors before there were ever any social justice warriors, right? You saw a team of people that didn't look like other superheroes. I mean, even the white guy was a big-eared, hillbilly from Kentucky, right? So these were like heroes that had never been, you had a girl from Ireland with, you had a person of color from Brazil, right? You had all these kind of diverse characters, but the story was there. You didn't care that one of the girls was a Native American because the story was good, right? And so, and ultimately he proved it doesn't matter what color or sex almost any character is. You could literally write any character and change their color, and as long as they're a well-written character, I mean, 99% of the things that we do as humans are exactly the same. Everything else is surface traits. And what the evil that you're kind of getting at, I think, is when people make us focus on these indelible 1% traits that.
Well, the
that
evil is totalitarianism.
Well, yeah, right. And they don't give you it. They say this 1% is important, and you can't disagree with that. So
I'm going to have to bow out here, Scott.
no problem. I think we've kind of gone the course. Real quick before you go, Mike, why don't you tell us what you've got going on? Let me share an image here.
We're launching the campaign for Thin Blue Line next week. Thin Blue Line is a graphic novel about two police officers trying to survive the night in a riot-torn city. My artist is a full-time police officer, and he still found time to finish the novel the art faster than many pros.
Oh my gosh!
See if you can get that cover up there.
Yeah, I'm going through my tabs here. I'm failing spectacularly. What's the story about?
Two police officers trying to survive the night in a riot-torn city. You're going to see a lot of familiar situations. We don't finger it. That's it. We don't finger anyone, though. I guarantee you're going to be hooked from the first page. I never forget job one, which is to entertain. And this story is absolutely gripping from first page to last.
And you got a police officer working with you on this. I mean, how instrumental was he in just bringing that realness out?
He penciled the whole book. I've known Joe since before he was a police officer. He was always drawing. He always wanted to do comics, and he became a police officer about 5 years ago. He was a full-time cop in Windsor, Colorado.
Is this his art right here on the cover?
That's Butch Geis. That's Jackson.
Oh yeah,
Geis,
Butch Geis. Yeah.
I worked with on the Flash. If you go to, I sent you the link in the private chat, and you'll see Joe's art on that if you follow the link.
All right, let's see. I'm like a chicken with the head cut off. Here we go.
Don't show the chicken.
Amen to that. All right, here we go. Yeah, this art is great. So you get what you haven't launched yet. You're on the sign up page, so they can go and they can go and sign up for that.
Yes, please.
And yep. And what? So is there any advantage to signing up early? Are there like secret tiers or anything like that?
I think there are, and if you scroll down the page, you'll see them.
Yeah, let's see. Let's do that. Here we go. All right. So, look at that art. That's great. Yep. So you get some extras. Okay. Now there are some exclusive stuff. So the bottom line is folks need to sign up for this, and they'll get hit up when you guys go live, and they'll be able to use those secret perks to kind of get over and get some good goodies. Yeah, no, that's great, Mike. I think this is, the police have kind of come under fire in our country, and I think what you're probably I'm gonna guess, I don't have any inside knowledge, but what you're going to show is that police are people, and people have kind of universal traits when they're under stressful situations. And I'm really looking forward to this one.
Well, nothing is black and white, but we do show the police in a sympathetic light.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Anybody who goes out to serve, as long as they keep that in their hearts, I think they'll be. I think that'll be somebody who's of value. So let's see. Okay, so hey, Mike, I don't want to hold you any longer. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks, guys. Send me contact info for Ryan and Mike, or Ryan and Mike Bennett.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to hook up with those guys. Just send it to me on Twitter or something.
All right, I'll you know what? I'm going to put you guys both in our DM group for this channel. All the members of the panel are in a DM chat, so I can throw you guys in there, and you can go from there. All right, hey, thanks again, Mike.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, let's see. All right, so we are. we are coming to the end of our time here. Mike Bennett, you want to talk about what you've got going on?
Yeah, I sent a link, and while you're playing around with that and posting it, I would just say.
Oh yes. Oh yeah.
Just one little link.
Yep. Let me
so what I'm writing about, and I guess why, after 30 years of being in the military, it's a little dissatisfaction, and I'm not going off the deep end, but a little dissatisfaction with actual policy. Now, just scroll down, and you'll get a nice, colorful picture right in the middle of the page. As an example, that picture, just as an example. But what I'm writing in this series is my take, essentially, of what I think policy should be, and that is we have extraordinary tools that we're not using correctly. That being special forces, that being cyber, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of it relates to our foreign policy, weakness of foreign policy, and I'm subscribing a little more aggressive use of some of these tools. All of it would be non-attributional, non-attrib to the United States, clandestine and covert actions. And that's what the whole series is. So the first, once you get out of the first book, that kind of sets a stage of one of the protagonists, and then you go into the second book, you introduce this concept of a guy called the Warlock. And the Warlock really is the guy that runs American foreign policy, and you don't really give a damn who the president is. He's just a guy in a suit that's out there. But the Warlock really does things on his own. And in that first book of the actual actions, when towers fall, you target the relationship of Turkey and Russia. And then in the next book, the Baltic Chain, you target Russia because of the way it's annexed Crimea, Donbass, all those sorts of things.
Right. Yes.
And with what Mike was going, really, that the spirit someone should read into all this is something I certainly believe. America is good.
Yeah.
We are the root of all good things. When something happens in this world or needs to happen, who does the world turn to? The world does not turn to China. The world does not turn to Russia. They turn to the United States of America. So we're not doing any of these actions that I'm talking about in an evil way to control the world and gain domination. We're trying to take away some of the bad influences of a Russia or a China, and most of it really it's an economic kind of war to reset the balance. And that picture, what I was getting at is, so you're knocking off Turkey, then you hit Russia, and then you hit China in the Baltic, in the fourth book that's coming out, and then the last book comes back around to Iran, which is what this is all about. This port, and I think I mentioned somewhere today in Twitter, ironically, what's going on in Los Angeles, off the shore of Los Angeles, or California, I guess, generally. But that's what I want to create in China.
Right.
I'm doing some things to mess up their supply chain.
That's.
And then the last book kind of finishes all these kind of actions with Iran, and that's what that picture down there is this particular port. So here you have a nuclear at the cusp of being a nuclear Iran, whether we know it or not. All of a sudden, also becoming quite an economic power by transit of goods and services coming from India through this port, going up, through Europe, where the United States is getting cut out of the entire thing. And the question people should say is, hey, is this a good thing? Is this a good idea? That the fourth book, I get a lot into the Uyghurs in China and how repressed they are.
Yes.
There's a lot of issues in there that you're not seeing on a daily basis on the news. It's just not being covered.
Oh, yeah. No,
it's a saturated with other stuff, but there's a lot of things going on. And my point really is, these people are not good. What they want to achieve is not good. And the only guys out there right now that can counter that is us. Yeah. And that's what the whole series is. So I'm book 4, Boomslang Gambit will probably be published in a week or 2 in print. And then the 5th book, I'm hoping to get that done prior to Christmas. I'm in the middle of writing that.
Oh, very cool. So, Mike, I've been threatening for a long time to do a foreign policy show. I always thought I would call it Writers on Policy. And if I ever do that, you're going to be one of the first people that I invite, because you are tickling all the keys that I like to think about on a regular basis. I've been thinking a lot about China.
I certainly don't want to be prescriptive. I mean,
absolutely.
I'm saying things, probably nothing original as far as actual policy.
Right.
The way I deal with implementing a conduit to the product. That's the fiction that I'm writing. That's all me. That's my twisted mind. But that's an interesting thing. And I think we were talking earlier with all these other, the Superman thing is just one example. All these things I look at now at my age, I look at as, what is this next generation going to have to deal with? Is everything it's the way I just see everything now. There's a consequence, there's a cost, all these kind of issues floating around, and that's the prism through which I see everything. And I'm not, I don't want to impose this is the way I think it should be. I just like the discussion where people, at the very least, are aware.
Well, the interesting thing about our business is that you can play fast and loose with things that would have huge impacts in the real world, and kind of game them out, if you will,
right,
through the exercise of fiction.
Right. I am absolutely positive. I've done some cyber stuff. I certainly understand the big picture type stuff, but when you really get down to actual code and no. So if there's a guy out there that's like one of my characters in the story, reading it very, very technically, he's like, oh, this guy doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. But that's okay. It's fiction.
Yeah, it's right.
Just think big picture. When you read my stuff, don't get down into the minutia of it, even some of the military stuff, right? Don't bog down in some of the technical detail, because I purposefully, maybe even for classification reasons, but I purposefully obfuscate certain things, or I misattribute a certain kind of activities to someone. The United States Geological Survey is never going in God's world ever, to do something spooky, right?
Right.
They fucking do maps. That's what they do. They make maps. So it's fiction.
In fiction, fun. It's plausible that you can throw something like that in there. So that works for that, because there are people who do those things that you're writing about that just don't happen to work for that government agency.
Yep. And oh, by the way, I apologize for using profanity.
Oh, you're fine.
It comes out.
I have such a large audience. Usually the one person watching live won't complain. So, I've been really surprised how people have reached out to me. We may not be their choice for live entertainment, but several, people that I respect greatly have reached out to me and said, hey, I really like the discussions you're having on your show. So, that's the whole idea here. We like to talk about things that nobody else are talking about. And there's not a whole lot of, in our world, I don't see a whole lot of writing stuff. And what you're talking about is spot on about using fiction as a way to kind of exercise real world problems. But Ryan, I wanted to bring you in here at the end. you're still muted, so I don't know if you maybe you just don't want to talk to us. I guess not. All right. Well,
What?
hey,
No, I was just
there
waiting
he is.
because
See,
everyone else
there
was
it
chatting.
is. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to get in on this right before we close out here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a couple points that I'd make, like with as far as it comes to like comics and social justice warrior type stuff in media. I mean, some of it is I guess you'd call propaganda. My biggest thing is I want a good story. I want good characters who aren't just two-dimensional platforms for message fiction. And with comics, you know, I'd like to see good art. I mean, personally, for me, I don't care if Superman's gay. I don't care if he's kissing his boyfriend. It doesn't bother me. I don't see that as being subversive. But I'm, you know, super gay friendly, so I may have a slightly different take on it.
The issue is not the gay thing. The issue is the fact that they remade something, you know, to kind of change the old character's legacy. You know, if you had introduced a brand new character and said, "Oh, by the way, he's also gay," I mean, nobody would care, and that's the reason why they're doing this. They're converting these, you know, like
yeah.
Robin.
Well, what they're doing is that the publishers and the studios are afraid to do anything new. They just want to cash in money.
Yeah, well,
really is
no,
what it comes down to.
I think you're right. Look at all the media attention DC's gotten over this. I mean, you know, they don't think about the story. They think about how many issues is this going to sell, and this, you know, this big issue will sell a lot, and then nobody will care after that. That's the sad thing.
Yeah,
the legacy continues.
Yeah, no, it is. It is.
But
you know, I think really with a lot of stuff, you know, they can afford to produce stuff that's not going to make money, and I really feel that the reason why they're doing it is from a public relations standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
They're appealing to a small minority that is very vocal, and they can produce these titles that aren't going to sell. They're not going to make money, but they can say, "Hey, look, we're enlightened too. We're woke too.
Yeah,
we're on board."
It's corporate virtue signaling, is what it is.
Oh, absolutely, and that's every corporation's doing it.
Hey, we were talking earlier, and I mentioned the movie Ghostbusters, which I think was a failure commercially.
Yeah, it was money. Absolutely.
Does anyone know? I have not watched it. I've seen the first Wonder Woman. I thought it was great. I just enjoyed it.
The first one was great. Yeah.
And then you had the second one, and then I started to read that it did not do as well at the box office. And now I'm seeing on Vudu, you know, it's been on Vudu for like 2 months, and they've already dropped the price to sell at, you know, $9.99, which to me is indicative that, you know, they have to drop the price to get people interested in it. Do either of you know, was that a bomb also, or?
Yeah, so it was not a bomb in the sense that Ghostbusters 2016 was a bomb. I mean, the Ghostbusters 2016 barely made its budget back, and then it went completely in the red. It was in the red for all of the marketing, which is generally the same size as the actual budget. So it's way in the red. I think Wonder Woman probably got close to breaking even, but it was nowhere near the success that the first movie was, because the first movie was a classic, you know, hero's tale.
I only say that like Ryan saying, you know, I don't give a crap. When I watch TV, I've always said to myself, I guess not to anyone else, but if I want to be educated, if I want to get some great thought process out of, I'll read a book.
Yeah,
you know, I will read a written book that has all kinds of footnotes and is well researched and peer reviewed, all that kind of stuff, I'll read a book if I want to become educated. If I want to get all that great information out of a movie, to me, I don't. I just want to go and sit and vegetate in front of a boob tube and drool on myself, but laugh, have a good time. I'll eat popcorn, and that's all I care about. So the Wonder Woman thing, I mean, the first one was fantastic. It was just a fun movie. It was great.
Yeah.
And then I'm hearing the second one is not as good. I'm like, why would you want to ruin, something that was certainly, I would think, meant to have 3, 4, 5 movies that would be at least equal the first, or close to it. Why would you want to ruin that?
In the terms of many of our SJW friends, I think there are many things about that movie that are problematic. Is from our worldview and from just storytelling. It just things that just didn't make sense, right? I honestly haven't seen the movie, but I've read the in-depth synopsises and I've seen a lot of reactions by people who did watch it that I respect. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I know anything more about the movie than that, but I can also say there's nothing about it that attracts me to want to see it.
Well, I'm sorry. I think what Ryan was saying is PR stuff. It's just check the block that they can now say, yep, we did SJW such and such, check. Now we'll go back to doing the other stuff that was much more successful. And Ryan, I guess I agree with you.
Well, I know I threatened.
Yeah, I mean it's the same thing with a lot of the trainings that corporate employers are forcing their.
You cut out, Ryan.
Fusion training, and you have to go to it, and the heads of the company may or may not give a shit, really, but they can say in a press release, "Hey, all our employees have taken this training, so we're on board," and that keeps the loud minority from
Wolves of Bay
boycotting their business.
Well, no, I know I threatened to end the stream, but now that we're talking about this, I wanted to get your guys' reaction. Did you guys see the Joe Rogan interview with Sanjay Gupta this week?
Nope. Again, I read about it. I get the kind of the general gist.
Yeah, I would recommend you could get everything you need from all the supercut videos that are on Twitter. But I mean, essentially, what he says is, Joe Rogan said, "Hey, your company lied about what I did." And he said, yeah, they shouldn't have done that. So that was on Joe Rogan's show. Sanjay Gupta then goes back on CNN and parrots exactly the lie that ivermectin is horse medicine or whatever.
Yeah, see, that's a whole different issue. The media's integrity. That's an entirely different issue.
Well, but it's the same type of spirit, right? It's like they're gonna piss on your leg and tell you it's raining, right? I mean, it's just this whole kind of distortion of reality, and so the great thing about it is that just because guys like us may catch it, 80% of the people out there won't. That's what makes propaganda, because people just don't have the time to.
Mike was saying that earlier. I mean, I'll just say Americans, just for kicks and grins. Yeah. They go to work, they go to work. Why? Not because they love it. It's not their dream job. They go to work so they can make money to buy whatever stuff, whatever it is. I want a great big watch like Scott has. I want a big ass watch. Yes, that's right. I have to get a job so I can buy stuff.
Work hard for this damn watch.
And most people, that's what they're focused on. They got their work, they do their work. There's a certain amount of time they have left at the end of that they're not completely exhausted, that they apply to their family in some fashion, and then they go to bed and they do the same thing the next day. I don't really give a crap what's going on with so-and-so and especially celebrities, that who cares, man? I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't have time for that shit.
Well, I mean, that's how we get I don't know if you've heard the term, but normies, right? Like people on Twitter think that everybody knows everything else that's going on Twitter, right? But most people have no clue what we're taking in on Twitter, and we're such a small percentage of the population. And so, you know, and that's one of the things that I don't think guys like us forget it, because we're actually grounded in the real world. We have real relationships. We interact with people outside of social media. But there's this kind of sect of people who are, you know, who only interact with the world through something like Twitter, and they have convinced themselves that Twitter is real life. That's, you know, and I think there's a lot of crossover into this, you know, kind of woke comic industry and woke movie industry with people who live their lives on Twitter.
Well, and also the thing you have to keep in mind is that whether you're living your life on Twitter or Facebook or whatever social media platform you're on, you're living in a bubble. So not only is everything
seriously
fake, because no one's their real self online, but you're also living in a bubble. And so I mean, that's one reason why our country's become so bifurcated, is that people spend their lives in these bubbles where it's just an echo chamber, and everyone agrees with everyone, and you step out of line a little bit and you get blocked and pushed out of the bubble.
Right.
And that's a problem on both the right and the left.
And you learn that, you know, it's like high school, I guess. You know, I'm not going to wear a bow tie in the classroom because I know I'm going to get, you know, just wailed on by my classmates. People do the same thing now in Twitter.
That's exactly
They
right.
don't really throw it out there, you know, unless they're trying to make a provocation, to make a point. You know, they're just playing a role and they just throw stuff out there. Yeah, it is a bubble. It's its own little thing. But what is interesting is, I know I'm old enough to. I grew up. We had TV. You know, three TV channels.
And social media was your telephone, right?
Yeah, there was nothing like that, and in kind of a short period of time, you know, it's not, but just say 50 years. You know, look where we're at, and the trajectory that we're on. You know, this isn't going to stop. I mean, it's just going to keep going.
I would contend that anybody who was living life when I graduated from high school in 1992 has experienced a change so great in the last 30 years that, you know, I mean, I don't know that it's going to take another 100 years for us to completely digest what we've done in the last 30, but think of all the things that are going to come in the next 10 years. I mean, you're into tech, you understand, you know, AI and where that stuff's going. I mean, just imagine once AI gets kind of embedded into this whole thing. Yeah, they're going to, AI can social media, you know, all around us, and we'll never know it.
You mean,
well, I mean, in 20 years, us writers will be out of a job because AIs will be writing all the books.
Again, everything like what you just said, Scott. Yep, I got you. Yes, sir, you're absolutely right. And the immediate thing I'm thinking in the back of my head is today's children. You know, what are they going to do, and how are they going to do it? You know, all this stuff you're talking about, all this bombardment of stuff. What is relevant to them? How can they make a living doing something in this world of AI or whatever? You know, these kids are going to have to figure this stuff out, and I feel kind of bad for them. I personally want to leave them a world that's not so fucking hard to navigate.
Yeah,
you know, that they can succeed without having to kill themselves in the process of, you know, being competitive with X, Y, or Z. These things are all just interesting to me, and that's just how anything I hear or see, that's the way I think about it. Is, yep, you know, my whole life, and yeah, that's fascinating. Who gives a crap? But these people now that are doing that transition from 14, 15, 16. 17, you know, the first thing is, okay, do I go to college? You know, they don't think in terms of how am I going to pay for that, but I mean, you know, is that a step I want to take, or do I need to take?
Well, but you know, the interesting thing about it is this current generation, Gen Z, this is the first time that you've had sizable numbers of high achievers that are coming into the college age range that are saying, should I even go to college? Because they're ahead of their peers because they found YouTube videos that taught them how to think, and now they can think circles around their teachers that are completely like drones.
Back in the Ice Age, you had to have that nice piece of paper called a degree on your wall that showed people that
that you know how to learn, right? Yes, that's exactly right. That's all it was. I used to explain to my soldiers when I was a company commander, hey, get a degree, get any degree. It doesn't matter because all they're going to ask you is, oh, do you have a degree? Yes. Then they won't care about what it is or anything like that going straight. I think the college is, oh, here we go. I think this is right on topic here. Most people won't go to college in 20 years. It's seen as a waste of money except for a few licensed jobs. Yeah, no,
you're absolutely right. I mean, my last probably 5 years as a program manager, people having certifications, relevant
certifications. Because that shows that you actually know how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. You went through a process, you had a curriculum, you went through it, you succeeded, you took a test, you proved that yes, you were certified as a, software developer, software engineer of some sort, Python, C++, whatever. So yeah, I think that's, but it's still at the end of the day, whether it's a college degree, a piece of, lambskin or whatever the hell it's supposed to be, or, a certificate, which, oh, by the way, people that read my book, you do get a certificate of telecom proficiency. I'm just throw that out there. You'll see it on Twitter occasionally. When someone says they read my book, they get the certificate. But anyway, it's still a cert that says I did X. It has a monetary value. Hire me because I have such and such. So you can't get away completely from just going on to YouTube. You have to have the credentials to get into the door.
Yeah.
And get an interview with somebody, and then they can ask you a lot of questions. And hey, man, this guy really knows his stuff.
Well, the
YouTube thing probably wouldn't cut it.
Well, no, it's funny you should mention that because, so my first career type job coming out of college was as a web designer. I did the front end, stuff for websites. Now I had a degree in art, right? I had some basic computer graphics stuff, but I had no background in computer science or coding or anything like that. And so I literally
HTML. You weren't writing the actual HTML.
I was writing HTML, but the whole point was I had to learn that, and I learned it in very quickly,
real time.
Right, and I made my own website. I made gallery websites for my art and things like that. This was back in '95, back before they had WYSIWYG editors and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then that was in college, and then so I came out, and they said, "Oh yeah, if you want to be a web developer, you have to be able to do this. Oh, and you have to know this program." So I find that out on Friday. I've got the interview on Monday. I download the free copy. Actually, I got it from a CD from a freaking magazine that I bought at Barnes & Noble. And I took that home, put that in and I worked on it over the weekend. And by the time the interview came around, I had a new website that I had built over the weekend that I was able to show them that said, by the way, I know how to use, Dreamweaver. And so, I mean, that's how you just have to be able to bootstrap yourself into that stuff. And I think the point about YouTube is, you have to find the knowledge. Sometimes in the old days, it was a book, right? You'd get those kind of, I need to learn how to do HTML. So I get this HTML for Dummies, and I could sit there and read the book, and I can learn the stuff. Well, nowadays, kids are learning on YouTube, and then they take that test.
I do want to say one thing, because Ryan, I have read not all of your book, Ryan. I have read a pretty good part, and I think I said so in the Twitter thing. You are a great writer.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
You are absolutely a fantastic writer, and I just enjoyed the hell out of it. I like reading good writers, and I don't really care sometimes, what the subject is per se. If it's written and it gives me goosebumps, hey man, I am down with that. I love that. So I just wanted to put that out there. I was so impressed when I read it.
Mike, you'll be interested to learn then along this line that Ryan got his first 1-star review on Amazon.
Did.
So
I did. Yeah, it was a rating, not a review. So I don't know what they didn't like about it. But it was 1 star.
That. Man, I hate that.
I feel like
I got a 3-star, and I'm like, okay, what was it? What was it you didn't like?
Well, no, it was a rating, not a review. Yeah. So I don't know what they didn't like.
I hate that.
Yeah, I hate that. Yeah. That's why I do it. I go on to all my favorite authors and I just leave them like, 3 stars.
Okay.
No,
that's cool.
I'm just kidding. I would leave 3 stars, because then that's ambiguous. You're like, oh, well, this is probably real.
if you're going to do that, and that's fine. I mean, I guarantee you my stuff is not up everyone's, their favorite thing. I use big words because that was a word that is the exact right word for that, at least as far as I'm concerned. So that's one. Is it readable to somebody? Yes.
I would have liked to know the reason for the 1 star simply because it helps with audience targeting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's my point. I mean, that's all it like you were saying earlier, Ryan. I mean, at some point you have to treat this like a business. Why are you targeting, writing about vampires
It's like I still don't know. And this is why I wish Amazon would release the information, because they have it. Amazon knows, but they won't share it.
Yeah.
I really want to know who's buying my book. I want to know. Yep. I want to know gender. I want to know age.
Yep.
It would be so easy for Amazon to help authors that way, but I don't know why would do it.
You really, when you look at Google Analytics, so my brother does a lot of web stuff, and he's got SEO and all. He's got all these things, Google has all the analysis stuff relates to his web stuff. And it's kind of fascinating to read it and kind of look at all the stuff, because it segments all the things, and you go, oh, you've got, 27% of all the blacks in Chicago, like your, whatever. I'm just making something up. And you really would think, just for Kindle in the Amazon ecosystem, that they would have all that kind of stuff, for an independent writer or anybody.
Well, interestingly, so like I sell my stuff through Indiegogo, and you can get a lot of that stuff through Indiegogo. They allow you to kind of drop your Google Analytics code in, so you're able to get a lot of that back end, like who's clicking on your campaign, even if they don't buy, what's the percentage of clicks versus buy, unique users, views per day, all these kind of, depending on how interested in that kind of metrics you are, you can really get into it. So. Mike, I just want to end on. So I have not read your work yet. I actually have bought Las Vegas on $12 a day, and I'm definitely going to be reading that. I want to, because you are focusing on a lot of the same stuff that I think about a lot. But listening to you talk about it and reading the synopsises and stuff like this, I think that you could definitely adapt your work to a graphic novel. That's my course. I think that would be very cool.
It probably could. Me personally, I'm not talented.
Well, you don't have to. You've already written the book. That's all you'd have to do.
Right. It's interesting, especially as as a military officer, you receive information a lot, whether it's PowerPoint, whatever. But there's a visual, and a visual representation of some kind of data.
Yeah.
I need to consume in my brain. Words doesn't really cut it. If I have to listen to someone, it really helps me to see the pictures, and that's why in my book, I as a fiction guy, I'm putting some of this, stuff, pictures, because I think it lends to the story. Otherwise, I have to write 50 pages just to describe that map that we showed up on the screen.
No, like I totally get that, and that's the reason why, like, that's what made when you told me first that you had pictures in your books, that made me think, this is probably something that would be very cool, some visual storytelling,
Well, it's I guess you'll see if you do. What I guess what I would say, I mean, I do like my first book. The protagonist has great meaning throughout, and you should be able. I would just say probably skim through the first book unless you really like tradecraft, unless you really like spy shit, right? Unless you really are into that, and then like technical SIGINT type stuff. Unless that's your thing, you can kind of skip over there. You get the general idea, and then the last third of the book is much more action, type stuff, applying some of the principles earlier. But once you start getting into the second, third, fourth books, it's a lot more of story type orientation. The first book, I'm not going to say my own stuff. It's really weak.
Yeah.
But it could be tedious unless you really like that stuff.
Yeah.
It's different than any. One review I had said, what's kind of interesting about this book is you see the James Bond on TV, and that looks sexy. That looks so cool. It's total bullshit, but it looks absolutely, But this guy, when he's writing him, I'm like, yeah, this is much more. And really what I'm talking about is time. James Bond walks in and they're doing whatever, and they point to the movie screen, the briefing screen in front of the whole thing, the big Star Wars jock, and immediately some guy, he gets the video camera in London right there at that moment in time, and he gets the license plate of, that's total horseshit. For that to actually happen would take years and years and years of engineering,
or some guys go into a conference room and exchange 4 lines, and then they've condensed down a 6-hour decision brief with essentially a 15-second conversation. So
which is very convenient for a story, but not real.
No, it's interesting that you should mention that your first book is all about tradecraft, and if I'm interested in that, then maybe I'll read it. Well, guess what? I have a book that is all about the Doorkickers, who work for us for an agency, just kind of like what you're talking about, and I'm always looking for new ways to kind of learn about that world, because that's part of that's part of my expertise that I never got into. I was always on the other end of it.
What is a little bit different about mine is, and let me grab that book, and just the very beginning, on the very first page, the dedication type stuff, and I say, I'm just reading. In appreciation, this book is dedicated not only to the special operations community who stand in the breach. Now, I'm talking about your Doorkickers. Kick down the door and smoke bad guys as they come into the stack, right? So not only the special operations who stand in the breach, but to those enablers on the fringe, unseen and unheard. And that's really what that book is about. The amount of time to get people into position to set the stage for when you say go, green light for the door kicker. That's the kind of people. And, it's interesting, but it takes a long time.
Yeah.
It could be 6 months, a year, 2 years to get.
You mean you don't plan an op in 2 days?
Yeah, it can be done. It's been done before. All I'm saying is I really think the really good stuff, I think, just as a reader, just general reader, starts happening in the second, third, fourth, fifth books. The first one has got some primer type foundational stuff in there. And throughout the whole course, the POI, you're going to learn what is unconventional warfare in
Right.
the context of special forces. If you didn't know it before, you have a pretty damn good idea by the time you get done of what that really entails and how complicated that is.
So I hear the dinner bell ring, so I have got to cut it. Actually, it's not the dinner bell; it's the breakfast bell for me. So we've got to break off here. Mike, why don't you tell them where they can find you on social media and tell them about where what you have available.
I'm under Twitter, Colonel COL Mike Bennett with a 1. I guess I did that because the first time I did it, I screwed it up, so I had to do it again. I was very new to Twitter. I had no idea what I was doing. So Colonel Mike Bennett, number 1, at Colonel Mike Bennett. And right there on the profile page, it'll have the, click here. It'll take you to Amazon, the 3-book series. Or if you do follow me, obviously I throw that stuff out there, once a day, every 2 days, whatever. So you'll see it on your timeline. But that's the only place I'm at. I'm just on Twitter. My stuff is available on either paperback or Kindle, with the exception of the Baltic Chain is not in Kindle yet. Should be by the end of the week or whenever the 21st is. I think Thursday. So that's the only place you can find me. I don't have a web page.
No, that's great. I mean, so I've got your Twitter handle down in the description down there. Also, I've got the link to your Amazon page so that they can find your books that way. So I definitely encourage you. Like I said, I bought book 1. The problem with knowing so many writers is you get a lot of books and it's hard to keep up. So reading, I'm finding as I get older, is the thing that takes longer and longer. Let me ask you, any chance of any of this stuff coming out as an audiobook?
Not with my voice.
Not your voice. I didn't know if you're giving some thought to hiring and going through Audible or anything like that.
I guess for me to do that, I'd have to see more commercial success as far as sales and stuff. I mean, if people really did like it, and I got a huge volume of people that really enjoy, I guess I would. I certainly would, because you're not the first person that's asked that, and I get it. People get a 45-minute drive into commute to work or whatever, and they throw in the audio thing and get it that way.
Yeah, I've got my my 2.5-hour 9-mile rucksack that I have this afternoon, and that's when I get to listen to books on tape. So I'm getting a lot of reading done while I'm breaking in boots. So
those days are over for me.
It's a bad habit that I picked up as a young infantryman, and I like the solitude. I like to have a heavy weight on my back, and my knees still work, my back still works. If my body tells me to stop doing it at some point, I will. But until then, it's an escape.
It just
if your knees still work, you must be an officer, because no NCO your age would have knees that work.
No. Shockingly enough, I did all the things that you should do to destroy your knees, and I'm old enough to have done it. And I was both an NCO and an officer, so I am blessed with genetics that I don't deserve, both mentally and physically. That allows me to eat a lot of crap and not have a huge fat gut. So
I put up the rucksack about probably 5 years ago. I used to do the AT, the Appalachian Trail, quite a bit.
Oh yeah, I love. I've done segments of it. It's great.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I liked just getting out there. You just whatever's going on in your mind, whatever's going on in your life, you just kind of zone everything out, and you just kind of drive right, with a ruck on your back. But it caught up to me as far as like Ryan said, knees. My knees, they just can't do it.
All right, Ryan, after you disparaging my status as an officer here, go ahead and I don't even know if I want to let you promote your.
Well, I can't help it. I was E4 Mafia, so
That's right.
Comes with the territory.
You're making people dig fighting positions in the volleyball court out in the barracks. Yep. And then burying your new privates in it. I know exactly what you're coming from.
Oh, yeah.
So,
we run the show.
Have you read Brett?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have. It cracked me up. Yeah.
Another book that I've half read, and that I loved every minute of that, though.
I really did. I really did. I mean, just that's a good example. The E4 Mafia. I mean, there has never been a truer coinage of a term as the concept of an E4 Mafia. I mean, it's absolutely true.
Yeah, no, specialist is the best rank. You don't have any responsibilities, and you can pawn off all the crap work on other people.
Yeah,
but that's the reason why the worst job in the Army is a team leader, because not only do you have to have responsibility for the first time, but you have to be able to do everything you're telling your soldiers to do. And a squad leader can stand there with his hands on his hip and say, "You guys do that over there, then you guys do that over there, and I'm going to stand here and supervise."
Not my squad leaders.
But all right. So Ryan, where can we find you? And
well, my Twitter handle is by my name there on the screen.
Yep, gotcha.
So you can find me on Twitter. Also, my website, ryanwilliamson.com. Check out what's going on. I got one book out, The Widow's Son. Have an anthology of Weird West stories. It's going to be coming out next year. Submissions open for that on November 1st, and I'll be announcing it when the submissions open. We already have about 12 or 13 writers signed up, so it's going to be great. And that's about it for me.
Oh, and you and I, we need to put our heads together a little more on this this weird science fiction world that we've been working on. I'm looking forward to having more information to share about that.
Yeah, what color's the sky? Is it baby blue yellow or gray? Or we gotta decide all that.
I know it's it's a work in progress, right? I think that world is a work in progress. All right. Well, for me, you can find me right here on Twitter, Scott McCullough without the H. If you want to find me on Instagram, just add an H to the end to the same tag. Both of those are down in the description. Currently, I've got the next issue of Doorkickers that we're working on. The link is down there in the description. We've got the Indiegogo sign-up page. Sign up before we launch, and you'll get access to exclusive discounted perks. And you'll also get a bookmark, sticker, and a poster for free with any of those secret perk orders. If you don't sign up before the campaign starts, you don't get access, right? So that's something you got to act now versus waiting until the campaign goes live. We're looking at going live first week of November, I think. I've gotten 5 of the 6 pages of art, and we're getting those colored right now. So hopefully we'll have colored art to show next week. We've got both of the covers up, and those are available for you to check out on my Twitter. We appreciate you sitting down. This is a nearly 2-hour discussion with some really great guys. Mike Bennett, I want to thank you for joining us this week. I hope to have you back in the future. And maybe if we don't talk writing, maybe we talk about the GATT scenario or something like that. It's some weird esoteric foreign policy mess. And I also want to thank Mike Bennett for coming on. Mike, he's a huge legend in comic writing, and I want to, the fact that a guy like him would come on a small channel like mine to talk his profession, I think that says a lot about a man. So I just want to thank everybody. Ryan, as always, you're the dependable member of the panel. Molly really kind of left us hanging there at the last minute. Hopefully we can get the band back together next week, and I want to reflect on some of the great stuff that we've learned from these 2 guests this week, and I also want to make fun for missing out. So that's all I've got for today. Thank you make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Nobody can, if you don't share with your friends, nobody's ever going to find out about the great information these guests put out. So I want to thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.